trading day, Tim, where we're seeing stocks in the red.
Yeah, NVIDIA certainly weighing on the trade, but I was just talking to Katie about Taylor Swift because the Eras Tour wrapped up, and Katie got to see Taylor Swift.
Not in Vancouver, did she?
No. In Toronto, though.
Yeah.
It was like one of the final shows.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. And I'm sad to see it go, the Eras Tour. You think about, again, the economic impact. Maybe that's why the stock market is down today.
It all comes back to markets.
Yeah, I could imagine some bears making an appearance now that Taylor Swift's Eras Tour is over.
Who's going to stimulate the U.S. economy, the regional parts of the U.S. economy, and be included in the Beige Book now that the Taylor Swift tour is over?
I shudder to think, someone has to pick up the mantle.
Well, we talk about sort of the $2 billion plus or whatever that she's grossed on that tour. I guess the big question is, what does she do with that money? You think she's piling into stocks? Is there some like ETF that Katie knows about, or maybe Bitcoin?
S&P 500. No, I think she's an index investor, Taylor Swift.
Yeah, she strikes me as that here. But look, the idea is that you're sitting on double-digit gains in the equity market. You're sitting on pretty healthy gains, even if you're in fixed income. And then, of course, I don't know, Bitcoin. Tim Stenovec.
Yeah, losing a little bit of momentum today, but still, hovering around above 95,000.
All right, well, I hope she invested wisely so we don't have to go through another Eras Tour all in 2025 as the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the S&P 500, and the Nasdaq Composite all close out the day in the red. The closing bells here in New York as we wait for these numbers to settle. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is going to move lower by more than 200 points, or about 0.5%. The S&P down by more than 30 points, or 0.6%. The Nasdaq down by a similar percentage drop, and the Russell 2000 shedding roughly 16 points, or 0.7%.
The S&P 500, if you pull back the layers of it, it's still getting settled, but we got 230 stocks moving higher today, 272 stocks to the downside.
All right, let's take a look at the sector performances, too, and pull up the IMAP. And there's a lot of red there. The only two sectors that finished in the green are healthcare, up by 0.25%, and real estate investment trusts gaining about 0.1%. The big decliners, financials losing 1.4%, communication services and utilities each down at least 1.3% as well.
All right, let's take a look at some of the gainers on the day today. A lot of news when it comes to M&A, potential M&A driving stocks higher. Look at that. Shares of Hershey up close to 11% today. It's the most going all the way back to 2016. At one point today, it was the highest in more than 2 decades, going all the way back to 2002, or the most, I should say, going all the way back to 2002. It is the highest going back to September of this year. Shares of the Hershey Company surging after Bloomberg reported that the snacks and sweets company Mondelez International is exploring an acquisition of the company. Our Bloomberg News team reported that Mondelez has made a preliminary approach about a possible combination, said that people who asked not to be identified, but because the discussions are private. We talked to Crystal C a little earlier. She's Bloomberg News Deals reporter. We don't know a lot about the numbers here, but the idea, of course, has to do with scale, declining business when it comes to snacking, fears of Ozempic, rising cocoa prices. This has been attempted before, back in 2016, I believe, so we'll see if it ends up happening now in 2024. Also, shares of Interpublic Group, speaking of the world of M&A, the advertising and marketing company Interpublic Group surging after news that Omnicom would acquire the company, creating the world's largest advertising company. Shares higher today by about 3.6%. The deal values Interpublic at $13.3 billion, excluding debt. It'll create a company with a combined annual revenue of over $25.6 billion. And shares of Workday also rising today. This as it's set to join the S&P 500, shares higher by 5%. We learned this after the close on Friday. Inclusion, though, in the benchmark, it's becoming more important for companies in a world that's increasingly dominated by passive investment funds. Maybe Taylor Swift is an index investor. On the flip side, expulsion from a benchmark can weigh on stock prices as passive investors are forced to sell the shares that realign with the S&P 500's new composition. Shares of Workday higher by about 5% today, Katie.
To be clear, it's not disparaging to say Taylor Swift is an index investor because the S&P 500 is up 28%
it's
and
like the
then
smartest
some.
move you could have made over the last decade, right?
Exactly. Well,
but does she follow SPY or the Qs?
It's a good question. Probably SPY, but again, I don't know this woman. In any case, let's take a look at some of the decliners today. We start with NVIDIA weighing on the big benchmarks. NVIDIA shares down 2.6%. That's after news that China has opened an investigation into NVIDIA over suspected anti-monopoly law violations related to that 2020 acquisition of Mellanox Technologies. And then Tim was just talking about this, of course, Omnicom to buy Interpublic in a deal that would create the biggest ad company. We don't have a price tag yet. The final price will be based on Omnicom's share price at the time of the deal's closing. That's expected to occur in the second half of 2025. But investors anticipating here that maybe it'll be a big one. Shares down double digits. And then I did want to end with T-Mobile. This was interesting. We heard from the CEO saying to be cautious about fourth quarter results. Basically, investors hearing that and selling, even though the CEO also said that results will be back-end loaded due to year-end factors. Shares finishing down about 6% or so.
Yeah, interesting comments from the T-Mobile CEO, and a quick honorable mention. Shares of Kimberly-Clark down about 1% on the day. This after we learned a little bit earlier during the start of the show that Costco is switching manufacturers for its Kirkland brand diapers, which had been made by Kimberly-Clark.
Costco moves markets.
Now that's being replaced by First Quality to do that. Let's take a quick look at yields here. Basically seeing modest gains across the board for yields, up about 2% on your 2-year yield, the most rate-sensitive portion of the yield curve, just about a week or so away from that next big Fed decision. Your 10-year still camped out right around 4.2%.
We are waiting several companies to report earnings. We're waiting on Oracle, set to hit just in the coming minutes. Vail Resorts, also MongoDB, C3AI, Toll Brothers coming a little later for a look at least one part of the housing market. In the meantime, I do want to talk a little bit about the way that NVIDIA has been weighing on markets today. We do know that China has opened a probe into NVIDIA. The idea is that there's suspicions that the U.S. chipmaker broke these anti-monopoly laws around a 2020 deal. It takes aim at the company as Washington steps up sanctions. Also raises questions what happens, Scarlet, when a new administration comes in January.
All right, let's break down some earnings. We just got results from C3AI. This company reporting a loss for the quarter, adjusted loss per share of 6 cents. Analysts were looking for a loss of 16 cents, so this is narrower than what was anticipated. It also raised its guidance for the full year as well, for the full year 2025. So you look at the stock price right now, the knee-jerk reaction is a big bump up of about 10% in after-hours trading.
Oracle's fiscal second quarter results are out. Cloud infrastructure revenue in line with estimates, $2.4 billion. The street was looking for, well, $2.4 billion. The share has taken a little bit of a leg lower here, despite the fact that adjusted revenue overall was up in the quarter, up about 9% to $14 billion, though that was just a touch shy of the average of street estimates. You see it there, 14.06. The street was looking for 14.12 in the most recent quarter. Operating margin relatively in line at 43 cents. And your bottom line number, 2Q adjusted EPS, $1.47. The street was looking for $1.48. So it looks like either in line or modest misses on most of the key metrics for its fiscal second quarter. Still coming through the release now to look at the outlook.
Okay, you guys are watching C3AI and Oracle down by 6%. I'm looking at shares of Vail Resorts higher right now in the after hours by close to 5%. Shares down 10% so far this year. The company sees fiscal year total reported EBITDA $844 million to $906 million. First quarter total skier visits coming in shy of estimates at 548,000 versus estimates of 610,538. The company does see fiscal year net $240 million to $316 million. Saw $224 to $300 million. And that's probably one of the reasons why the stock is higher. First quarter net revenue coming in at $260.3 million. That beats estimates of $252.9 million. First quarter loss per share coming in below estimates at $4.61. Estimates were for $5.03. Shares now higher by about 3.3%.
All right, let's also check in on MongoDB. It develops software, database software. You can see it beat on a number of measures. The third quarter revenue beat estimates pretty handily, $529 million. The expectations had been for a share lower than $500 million. And some movement, too, in the C-suite. COO and CFO Michael Gordon two-step down here. You add it all together, see how the shares are reacting up mightily right now, almost 10% after hours. But guys, heading into this print, MongoDB shares down by more than 14% year to date.
All right, so we are still getting earnings. We'll get Broadcom a little later this week, Costco as well, Adobe coming on Wednesday. Before we get those numbers, though, we will see you guys back here, same time, same place tomorrow. That is going to do it for our cross-platform coverage of the closing bell on radio, TV, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals. We'll see you tomorrow, guys.